Welcome to Conversations from the Collection, a Newcastle Art Gallery podcast. This podcast was produced on the land of the Awabakal and Warramai people. We pay our deepest respects to elders past, present and emerging. I'm your host, Zana Kobayashi, and each episode will be diving into a new collection area of the Newcastle Art Gallery to uncover hidden stories from artists who have contributed to the significance of our diverse collection. In this episode, we speak with Japanese ceramic artist Kenji Uranishi from his home in Brisbane. Kenji moved to Australia over 18 years ago, and the freedom he experienced away from his home country allowed for an exciting shift within his practice. Kenji works with porcelain to create intricate, patterned works inspired by the natural world and architectural forms. I first met Kenji in 2019 when he was part of Newcastle Art Gallery's exhibition Sadesha Connected to Australia. And in our conversation, you'll hear Kenji refer to the Sadesha movement and some of the founding members, such as Kazuo Yagi, Hikaru Yamada, and Osamu Suzuki, who developed the avant-garde movement in 1948 and radically shifted the focus from functional to non-functional ceramics in Japan. This was an inspiring conversation where Kenji spoke about the two identities he now exists between as a Japanese artist living in Australia and the importance of long-term thinking to overcome failure when working with an unruly medium such as ceramics.
When I was little, school education in Japan is very different to Australia, and I was probably overwhelmed and I wasn't really fitting in that situation. So I ignored homework a lot, and I still wanted to do something towards the people. So I often go to stationery shop on the way home, from the school. And I buy, cardboard with the graph on it. And I just chop the cardboard and make some sheep or, tank, that kind of thing. And then take it to the school. And then show, present my self-initiated homework to people. And then in my class, there was a shy little girl came to me and she said, "I'd love to take your work home, can I?" And I said, "Yes." And that was the moment I thought making something and then share with someone is the one. I found my space by doing that relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And then, but at that time, the school is not really focused on art. I can't remember what we did except study and sports. High school also the same. There wasn't really a program encouraging people to be, kind of artistic.
I think people can be surprised about how academically focused Japanese schools are. The very little children are working very hard, long hours.
Hard.
They go to school, they go to after school. Yeah. And it can also be hard to be outside of that.
It was difficult. Constant. Now I think about it, I had probably constant anxiety when I was studying in a class because I was always behind because I didn't do homework. So it goes just behind pretty quick if you don't do it properly. And how I survived was just to make something and be happy. Most of people, except me, went to the after school. Do you need to study that much?
And how did the idea of going to college for fine art come about in your world?
So the end of the high school, a lot of people start talking about what you're going to do next year. Are you going to uni or are you going to work? And some of friends started going to after school art school to learn drawing for the entering exam for uni, art college. And I said, is there such thing existing in the world? Because I didn't know anything about it. School teacher never mentioned about art school. So a few friends and I joined that school. I worked hard to understand how the pencil drawing works. I wasn't the best pencil, drawer, but I was really interested in learning. And then someday there was a clay model. You have to model your own foot. And that day I thought, this is really fun. And I realized that I really like three-dimensional work, just like I was doing when I was little, in my
Yes, with the
yeah,
cardboard.
with a cardboard. And I said to school teacher, I wanna do some entering exam for art college, and that was why I could enter Nara College of Art, Fine Art, and that was the beginning of my art practice. I truly didn't know much about art, so that was probably good thing because my brain was fresh, nothing to lose. And when I started learning ceramics, I chose the ceramics because of that experience of the tactile clay relationship. And I didn't know much about ceramics either. I knew ceramics. You can make pots, cup, and plate, but never done it before. So even first bisque fired piece was already wow moment for me, and that was big enough for me to say I'm gonna do this for whole life.
Oh,
So that was really good for me because I mean, majority of time you're just spending time with clay. So understanding the relationship, I mean the behavior, of a clay is very important. And at the same time talking about contemporary ceramics. So balance was for me it was perfect, and I was completely into South Asia movement deed, and I became big fan of Kazuo Yagi's work. That was the experience, from uni. South Asia movement became part of my practice.
can you tell me what it was about the sedation movement that you really identified with?
Mhm. And when I was successfully entered art college, I didn't know anything about contemporary side of, ceramic scene. So I've never seen anything like that. Just sculpture, with clay, which is very simple thing. But what they've done, especially Kazuo Yagi or another favorite artist is Hikaru Yamada and Osamu Suzuki. Those people work was just something I've never seen. Your body instantly kind of respond to their work, and I was fascinated. Why this work is so interested in communicating with my body almost. So that was a mystery, and that's why I like it because there's probably no clear answer. So you can keep going to search your own version of it.
After you left university, you started your own studio, Ken Kobu,
Yeah.
in Nara, and you exhibited across Japan. But you were working mostly in stoneware, is that right?
Yeah, I was into stoneware, kind of coarse, earthy clay, and using that clay to make some coil building or slab building structure, and more organic, I guess. I've done anagama, wood firing, so I was really into that kind of earthy stoneware style. I just loved it. And at that time, I was teaching ceramics to people, and I was in a group called Shintocho. And Shintocho is it's a bit like after South Asia movement is over, some of people from South Asia still wanted to exhibit their work, so they formed a new group called Shintocho, and I was in that group. So that was really a special opportunity, and I learned a lot. I was like a little boy just hanging around in that group. I was very nervous.
I imagine. When you join a group like that, do you have meetings? Do you have exhibitions together? Like, how structured is it?
It was actually quite simple but busy because we've done exhibition in Nagoya and Mie Prefecture and Tokyo as well. And they were experienced artists. They always know what to make, but I was sometimes I didn't know what to make. It was some kind of pressure, and I really had to overcome the situation to relax. But sometimes I failed. And I mean, in the kiln when I'm firing, just cracks and some good stuff happened as well. So yeah, good balance.
I think ceramics is it's quite a risky medium, and there's a lot of room for failure outside of your control,
Yes.
whether inside the
Yeah.
kiln. Is that something you've had to get used to in your practice?
Yes. It was difficult to become, ceramic artist. I think you have to have some. You are not perfect. You will fail. Doesn't matter. Kind of, mentality. You keep going. Doesn't matter. Next one might become good. But this kind of thing can be very hard for some people. I learned how to have long-term thinking, working for the archaeological site.
Yes, I wanted to talk to you about that. So, this was during your 20s, is that right? You were part time on an archaeology site?
Yes, after art college, there was 1 year of just purely becoming digger for the archaeological site, hand digging every surface. So that was a very memorable experience for me because in Japan there was a archaeological site everywhere, especially Nara. Nara have got so many artifacts underneath of the rice field mainly. And when I was digging, we found a few coffins. One was undamaged, and that was amazing experience because you could see the artifacts was beautifully organized, and pots and knives, and maybe 50-meter away, I found some little fire pit with a stone seed in the middle, and next to it there was a stone arrowhead.
Wow.
And that was a wow for me. Finding coffin was amazing, but that's for the dead people. The little fire pit was for the people who were there alive. So I felt, there was actually people were there, living and eating and hunting. And that moment I thought, this is why we are here. So that kind of experience gave me a long-term thinking. I'm just a little one within a really, really long time period.
I saw that you had written that you hoped that one day somebody would have that experience with maybe something that you've made. They can dig
Yes,
it up and
yes.
find.
That's how I started thinking about it because making process is always exciting, making art. But sometimes you feel like you're doing just homework, almost. Just making because of that opportunity in front is there. But actually, from that experience, I think realized maybe I shouldn't do that. Maybe I have to think about it a bit more long term. So my work will be more from myself. That's kind of giving me courage to finding my own language using clay. Takes time, I think. Mm.
I think that's an important lesson that many people could,
Mm.
apply to their life in all different kinds of ways, actually.
Yes, it's really hard to do.
So in 2004, you made the move to Brisbane, Australia.
Yeah.
And what prompted your decision to leave Japan? And
I did a ceramic class in Japan, and at that time there was a few people came from America or somewhere overseas, inviting me to a party. And at that party, there was a lady called Sonia, from Australia was there, and now, she's my wife, and she had to go home, so I decided to move to Australia.
That's beautiful.
But I didn't know much about Australian ceramics at that time.
Mm.
But I think that was a good opportunity for me to just isolate from my country so I can focus on my own practice.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you how you felt moving to Australia affected your practice.
Mm, mm,
Is
mm.
this when you started working with porcelain?
It's interesting that I kind of wanted to become like a newborn baby, just isolate from my own country. And I just go to Australia, and then I have to accept, what is there. So there's no point, I thought, to prepare. Sonia was very organized. In the valley in Brisbane, there was a gallery called Fusions Gallery. And then Stephanie Outreach Field was working for that gallery, and Sonia said, my partner, Japanese man, coming to Australia, so can he have exhibition? And she said yes. So she arranged the exhibition with Mitsuo Shoji, who is a Sydney-based Japanese artist. So we had a joint exhibition first week of my Australia.
Oh my gosh. What an introduction.
So I sent some work from Japan, which I used for the Shintocho group exhibition. And behind that gallery, there was a shed hiring studio. So I hired that studio, and there was a artist called Mel Robson, Australian ceramic artist. And she said, Genji, why don't you use porcelain? And I said, yeah, nice. Uh, so that was enough for me to say, okay, I'm gonna use porcelain now. Because she was making, yeah, beautiful stuff. And Australia was so bright and everything felt really new for me. So I was so kind of drawn to the light and the beautiful nature. So porcelain felt like a good combination. I didn't know much about porcelain, so I actually just started kind of fidgeting with the porcelain clay and started rolling and then made a lot of thin slabs. And I started cutting like when I was little, the cardboard
Mm.
paper craft. That was the beginning of my slab building piece.
Oh, that's so interesting that it relates back to
Yeah,
your
suddenly
cardboard.
go back to my primary school era, and that kept me going for even now. I'm enjoying that process. I can't not enjoy. Just so much fun.
Mm.
Mm.
Yes. So your work is it's often described as architectural. It
Mm,
has
mm,
those very geometric forms and lots of repetitive patterns. But I've heard that you actually draw a lot of inspiration from nature
mm, mm.
as well.
Yes, where I grew up have got a lot of temples, old buildings, and I was always fascinated by repetitive pattern. If you go to temple, you see the soffit and tongan grooves, exposed, timber structure, something, I always kind of drawn to. And I also spent a long time in the nature when other kids were studying. That process probably gave me more confidence actually. And Australian nature was for me shocking because I've never seen those type of tree before. Never been to rainforest. So my experience in Australian nature gave me another level of appreciation for the nature. And also, Nara was pretty low-key town. All of a sudden, in Brisbane, there was a high-rise. I'm calling this town New York, but so many high-rise for me, and that kind of thing fascinated me, and also started comparing, man-made architecture and also nature. And then when I saw something beautiful, your emotional response, there's sometimes no language for that experience, but I was fascinated by kind of imagining emotional response into a form. Music have got some emotional response into rhythm or melody, and I thought we must have, internally must have something responding to the shape.
And light is also very important in your work. I read somewhere that you said your work is incomplete until the element of light is added into it. Can you tell me about that relationship?
Yeah, I kind of don't want my work to feel like this is a complete piece. I made this, and this is what I've done, because it's kind of short-term kind of approach. Myself is not that important for me. The work and also someone else's relationship is more important. A lot of people said, "Oh, Kenji, why don't you put light in your work?" And I said, "Yeah, that's good idea." But actually, never done it before, because once I made this work, the work itself has to have its own life. So someone else create new relationship with that, and that's the beauty of, I think, relationship with the shape. And hopefully when they put my work near the window or somewhere the light can entertain, gives them a special moment, and that's the purpose of it. So I'm not orchestrating, lighting or
So I wanted to ask you about how you begin the process of creating a work. Because I've heard that you're quite lo-fi.
lo-fi.
You don't use a lot of technology.
Technology is like a cause of headache for me. So I'm really, yeah, analog kind of person. Some stage I try to learn how to draw three-dimensional design on the computer, but clearly I wasn't the right fit. It just didn't work. So what I do, often you have some special moment and you kind of memorize how you felt or try to memorize what you observed, and I try to really hold that emotional response. Some memory keeps coming back. Or maybe I can create this emotion into shape. And then when you felt like that, I do, really quick drawing, usually straight onto table, just using pencil and no pressure. So I just draw really simple lines. And then sometimes I leave it for days. And as you work, sometimes those drawing just disappears and gone. But sometimes some particular drawing just keeps talking to me. And that's when, okay, I have to do something with this drawing. So sometimes I translate that drawing into sketchbook. And again, it's so simple, just a silhouette. Usually just a silhouette. And then I've got two different technique. I do slip casting technique and also slab building technique. And then some are suitable for slab building and some are good for slip casting technique. So I decide the technique and I prepare the material and then start actually making from the real, rough sketch. The beginning of it is just like that. Very, very simple.
It's very immediate. I like that. Drawing
Mm,
straight onto the table.
and
It's,
automatically disappeared. So if you want to do something, you have to do something now, kind of.
yes, your practice has that focus on like transient moments.
Yeah, it's communication. Have to kind of communicate with what you're imagining, and sometimes takes time to understand or work that out. That's why sometimes my idea won't work and sometimes works. Yeah.
You seem to have a good relationship with that, though, which is good.
Not always.
In 2014, you were the recipient of the Asia Link Artist in Residence, and you spent 12 weeks in Arita, Kyushu, widely considered to be the birthplace of porcelain in Japan.
Yes.
What was your experience returning to Japan for this residency?
Yeah, that was an amazing opportunity, after 10 years of my new life in Australia. I was having so much fun making slab building sculpture, and that was the only technique I was using. I was happy, but that opportunity gave me a new direction because the one thing I was interested was designing some porcelain ware. So I went to mold maker to talk about my design, and there was an amazing master mold maker called Yamaguchi-san. And he said, do you want to learn how to make mold? In my head, I said, well, why? I'm asking you to make mold, but I didn't say that. And I said, yes, yes, please. And he kindly opened, his factory, on Sunday, just me and him. He showed me how to mix the plaster, which I thought I knew what to do. I've done some plaster mold making before, but whatever he did, everything felt something different, beautiful. And he showed me how to make model as well, carving plaster, you do this, and if you make mistake, you do this. And that moment, my brain started shifting. Beforehand, I was thinking about flat slab into three-dimensional shape, but Yamaguchi-san's technique gave me more three-dimensional curve-oriented design in my head. And that experience was so fascinating. So as soon as I came back to Australia, I just had to keep carving plaster. And that's what I
Yes.
literally did. And I felt so good and so excited. But I'm still bad at plaster mixing. Somehow, not not gonna be better forever.
Maybe you need to visit him again.
Yes, time to visit him again. It's interesting, relationship with people affects your thinking pattern a lot.
Yes, because slip casting has become a big part of your practice.
Yes. So that's why I use slip casting technique and slab building technique at the same time. Yeah, I've got two different skill to explore now.
Moving forward a little bit, in 2019, you were part of the exhibition Sedacia Connected to Australia at Newcastle Art Gallery. You were one of 10 contemporary ceramic artists from Australia and Japan to be featured alongside the gallery's significant Sedacia collection. What was that like for you?
That was very special for me. It was so strange, because I saw those work in a book or in a gallery in Japan, and I couldn't imagine my work also be part of it. Very special. Mm.
And we have two of your works in the gallery's collection. We have Dunpen fragments and the pleated bowl.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about these works?
These are exactly the example of slab building technique and slip casting technique. So pleated bowl is made by slab building technique. Roll the clay and make like a pastry and then cut and put together.
It almost looks like it's made of paper, that work, the
Yeah.
way that you've been able to create these sharp corners.
Yeah, it's be like a Japanese foldable screen kind of idea.
Yes, yes, that's
And
right.
very repetitive. So that work strongly influenced by my Japanese background. And Dampen is another good example of my experience with the model maker because without him, there's no such work. at that time I was into looking at the pandanus as well. In Okinawa there is this pandanus tree, but where I grew up there was none of that. So I was fascinated by structure of pandanus, and I wanted to show some experience from Australia and using my carving technique, and then result of that, shape became like that.
You've said before that work is also, so I'll explain it to our listeners, that there are two distinct hand-carved shapes that are brought together into one abstracted whole. And you've talked about that being a reflection of your two identities, your Japanese self and your Australian self. Do you still identify with that?
There's always two different identity for me. When you speak in Japanese, you are a different person, and when you are speaking English, you are another different person. So there is always two character kind of communicating to each other, and sometimes I feel like, oh, where's my home? And I think that kind of subtle shifting identity is just not gonna stop. So that's kind of made some of the work, have got two different shapes put together,
Yes. Yeah.
or two different, technique communicating each other. And that's kind of giving me another level of, life experience. So maybe I can have more deeper language into my work, hopefully.
Yes. Well, I think your work is your other language, I guess, your other way of communicating to people here in Australia, perhaps.
Yeah.
Okay, Kenji-san, we have reached our final question for our interview today. If you could have dinner with any artist from Newcastle Art Gallery's collection, who would it be and why?
So many artists in your collection. Too many artists. But I think I have to say Kazuo Yagi, because I've never seen him, but I see myself and him into a very small izakaya in Kyoto, and just having nice conversation about. I want to hear how he feel about current, ceramic scene.
Yes, yes. So he was one of the founding members of Sadesha.
Yeah, that's right.
Yes. Oh, that's wonderful. Well, thank you so much for your time. I really enjoyed speaking with you today. It was such a wonderful conversation with you, so thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
お時間をいただき、本当にありがとうございます。
こちらこそありがとうございました。
Thank you for listening to Conversations from the Collection. If you'd like to know more about Kenji or his works in Newcastle Art Gallery's collection, there are links in the show notes, or you can visit the gallery's website at nag.org.au. Make sure you join us next week as we talk all things video and new media with the amazing Joan Ross.
Working in these new technologies is actually quite hard to do. And often when I finish them, I don't ever want to do that again. But you've just got to be so brave. You've just got to be prepared to learn a lot and for it to be quite painful.
Conversations from the Collection is a Newcastle Art Gallery podcast. This podcast is supported by the New South Wales Government through Create New South Wales. If you enjoyed listening, please like, subscribe, and share us with your friends.